So hello to everyone there. That's all I'm going to say.
That's not what you're going to say.
What am I going to... Wait. So how is this... Are we starting this like it was actually...
Yeah, this is still the K-12 Engineering Education Podcast.
Okay.
And Rachel Fahrig in no way, shape, or form owns this podcast. This podcast is brought to you, the general public, by Pius Wong.
Thank you. It sounds like you read it off a piece of paper. But
I didn't. I read that off a bunch of neurons in my head. It was weird.
Congratulations. Thank you. So this is the K-12 Engineering Education Podcast. I am an engineer who is producing this. Rachel is an educator who's been co-hosting this podcast many times. And
hi, listeners.
Hello. We're having a live podcast recording that is taking the place of, unfortunately, the South by Southwest session. It's not taking the place.
It's just postponed.
Postponing the South by Southwest session that we were going to have. So Rachel, as our moderator and co-host today, I was wondering if you could introduce ourselves or introduce everyone to our guests today.
Sure. And so I don't actually want to do too much introduction. It's sort of my hope that I don't actually do a whole bunch of talking today. We had initially invited 3 EdTech professionals. And what I mean by that is these are educators who have successfully embedded technology into their curriculum, their instructional delivery, and then they also help other educators by training them and teaching them and coaching them in how to replicate these best practices. I will tell you who they are briefly, but my goal is for them to be able to tell you their stories, their pathways, their goals, so on and so forth. So we have with us today Victoria Thompson, who is in the sort of Seattle-ish area. She's in the far Pacific Northwest. And then we also have Steve Dembo, who some of you may recognize from his platform Teach 42, and he is out of Chicagoland area. So I don't want to talk about them. I want them to talk about themselves. So Steve, Victoria, y'all can decide amongst yourselves or between the two of you. Just tell us who you are, where you're from, how you got here in this EdTech career. How did you land where you are?
I guess if it's okay, I'll go first because I feel
yes, please.
To address the growling, my dog is on my lap because
hi baby.
A podcast or like I'm filming something. He just wants to be the star of the show. So
he should be. No, let's make him the star of the show. This can be _dog name podcast.
I think he thought that it was going to be video because usually I come up to the webcam. So he was legitimately growling because he couldn't see his face.
Oh, I love it. What's his name?
His name is Ren, like Ren and Stimpy.
Oh,
wow.
Hi, Ren.
Yeah, say hi.
Hi, Ren.
Yeah, he's super sweet. He was just a little grumpy.
That's okay.
So I am Victoria Thompson, and I'm originally from a town in New Jersey called Marlton. It's right outside of Cherry Hill.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can I pause? What exit is that?
Yeah, it is exit 34.
There you go.
Yeah,
all of us Northeastern listeners.
So I grew up in New Jersey. I actually went to school in Charleston, South Carolina, College of Charleston, go Cougars. I graduated in 2015 and then immediately began to work. And my undergrad was in elementary education. And then immediately began to work 5th and 6th grade math and science at a middle school in Summerville, South Carolina. And that is where I met my then fiance, now wife. And before we got married, she actually got transferred because she's in the Air Force from the base in Charleston to the base in like Tacoma, Lakewood area, Washington. So like suburban-ish Seattle.
Gotcha.
So when we first moved out here, it kind of happened very fast, military. So
the military is a lot of hurry up and wait, right?
Oh, definitely. Teaching certificate was in the process of being transferred, but I also knew that Seattle had quite a big tech scene. So I just kind of wanted to try out a different vibe. ended up being a full-time tech consultant for companies that do a lot of work with, I guess, what's called the big four, right? Like Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon. I really liked it, but I also really missed being with the kids. So what happened was I left a school that was actually way closer to my home because I was commuting about 4 hours round trip, Seattle, Redmond, and it was terrible, from Tacoma.
That's horrible.
Yeah, loved my job, but the commute was just killing me. So I actually got a job at a private independent school that's actually about 10 minutes round trip from where I live, which is amazing.
Yes, girl.
Much better. But I also still consult for companies, primarily Microsoft. So they actually reached out to me and was like, hey, all these cool projects you used to work on, do you still want to be on them? So I've kind of got the best of both worlds where I'm still working with kids. I still get to do what I do, which is teach. But most of the consulting work that I do in EdTech is with EdTech marketing, right? So there will be times where I might be the only educator in a room and I'm surrounded with developers and engineers and marketers, but they're coming to me to figure out if the content is appropriate, if the user interaction is appropriate, if it's user friendly, just basically spot checking and having a teacher's voice there, which I find to be very powerful. And then the other half of it is also consulting companies to make the next decision, like maybe the next step forward. So yeah, that's what I do. A little bit of everything, but it's always fun.
That's awesome. Just in brief, and Steve, prep yourself because I'll probably ask the same question. When you think back on your teaching that involved EdTech and then also your role as an EdTech professional outside the classroom, what one thing makes you smile?
Yeah, honestly, just getting out and meeting people. I think a lot of the time with EdTech and companies in particular, because I'm on both sides, right? I get the inside within the company, but I also get the teacher side. Sometimes on the teacher side, it does kind of come off like it's a bunch of tech bros, right, that don't really know.
I'm sorry. It was probably way too loud.
They're like, no shade, but sometimes that is kind of how, teachers view it. But I, of course, the video.
Oh, buddy.
This dog. But anyway, I
know we love him.
I think one of the most rewarding things, though, is being able to see what goes on the inside and, just meeting these people and making these connections and also having it be a collaborative effort. Because I think sometimes that's a little bit lost in the messaging when it gets relayed to teachers. But, we actively look for teachers and, we have research with them and we consult with them. So we really do try to make it as collaborative as we can, as well as, still getting the product out and making sure that it's good for everybody involved. But I love the fact that tech is not just computers and engineers and software developers. Tech is people like all of us. And I think that they do a good job of making sure that the word gets out and that we're all working together to achieve a common goal.
Oh my gosh.
Especially here in Seattle versus South Carolina. It just never would have happened in Charleston. But it's definitely great that I have it here. That is a really good story. I appreciate you telling us that. Yeah.
Oh, Steve, we're gonna head over to you. So same kind of thing. Who are you? Where are you from? How'd you get here? Specifically, how did you land in this EdTech career?
Well,
I love that you chuckled because again, I feel like I've known you for 10 years.
Well, the irony is I can attribute a lot of my foundations in EdTech to what we're doing right now, way back in the day.
Yeah.
I started off, as a kindergarten teacher, but then moved.
Wait, I'm sorry. Pause. That part I did not know about you. Kindergarten, really?
Yeah, I actually, my degree is in specifically elementary education, but specializing in early childhood.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Bless your heart, because no thank you.
I loved it. I couldn't believe they paid me to do it. Yeah. So, and then, after a few years in the classroom, I switched over and became the director of technology at a small private school in Chicago. So while doing that, I started getting interested in blogging and podcasting, and this is back when there weren't any tools to do it. I literally hand coded my own, Linux server, my own RSS feed. My podcast was hosted here in the in the basement of my
Holy moly.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember subscribing to RSS feeds.
Yep.
Oh, I
Way
can't imagine coding those.
Yeah, well, back in the day we didn't have there weren't any tools for it.
Oh,
This is I vividly remember, actually, it's a little bit of trivia. Apple, the very first time that Apple acknowledged podcasts and actually announced that they were going to be supporting podcasts on the iPod, was actually at an IST. I mean, I'm sorry, NECC, the precursor to IST.
oh yeah.
Yeah. So, and they did it at an education conference, which is kind of awesome. It speaks volumes too about where they thought the potential for it was. And it was the blogging and the podcasting that got me some notoriety. It was also jumping on social media very, very, very early on. A lot of people can point to me and say I was the one who started sharing Twitter.
Oh yeah, I remember I was an early adopter to Twitter, and you were one of the very first people I followed. So
so that kind of gave me sort of a jump start in the space. And then I wound up working for Discovery Education for 10 years. And then during that time started doing a lot more public speaking and working with the teacher community and so on. And then the last 4 or 5 years have been interesting. I left Discovery and started doing, consulting and speaking full time. Decided I didn't like it. And
which I'm sorry, I'm like, what? When I got your email, and I'm baiting the audience, but I'm also expressing my own incredulousness. Anyway, you emailed me and told me what your decision had been. I was kind of shocked. So you left public speaking, you left what is essentially global professional development to do what?
To teach middle school.
And I love it. That's the thing, though. I get it, and I love it.
After 15 some odd years, more than that, probably closer to 20 years away from the classroom, there's a small school here in the Chicago suburbs that had somebody who was stepping down to take care of some family members. Mm-hmm. So I interviewed 1 week, and 7 days later, I was in. I had my own class, my own classroom, my own lab, and teaching 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders.
Oh my gosh!
And then the world went to hell.
Wow.
Well, so I guess we can blame it all on you for your career.
That switch, that decision to go back to the classroom at that time was one of the greatest things in the entire world for reasons I'm sure we're going to sort of get into.
Oh, absolutely.
As we go along in this conversation, but it's really been a blessing being back in the classroom again.
Awesome. And just I know that Steve has a couple of middle school age children. And Victoria, do you have children also that you're having to homeschool or, provide instructional services for right now?
We are thankful to be childless.
I don't. You're all no shame.
I could literally not imagine having to be full-time worker, full-time wife, full-time parent. Like,
Yes.
My sympathy goes out to every single parent right now, especially the ones that are teaching too. Be blessed, but that is just not me.
No, there is no shame in that. So most of our audience knows that I'm a single mom. I have a 10-year-old child. He'll be 11 this fall. He's in 4th grade. He actually, it's so weird and random. He asked at the beginning of the school year this year, because he does have several learning challenges, Mom, how could I just please be homeschooled. I mean, he was begging, like he's looking for a solution for his problems, right? And so, as a mom, and even as an educator, it breaks your heart. And now that we are given that opportunity, it we have our challenges, but honestly, on the whole, it's been better for him academically. But I don't know that he has most students. And so it's just been such an odd set of uh, circumstances, or is it fate, or, you know? But anyway, he said, I want to be homeschooled. And I'm like, okay, well, you got your wish. So get your homeschool on, bruh.
Yeah, my son is enjoying a lot of elements of it, in terms of just getting his work done and then being able to, spend the day how he wants to.
Yeah.
And he's able. He's very distractible, and he's got a lot of close friends, and sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge in a classroom environment, and he doesn't have those distractions here. So he's been enjoying that, but at the same time, that the loss of the social end of it is tough.
You got it. And Steve, I'm sorry if you don't mind sharing, your kids are in what grades?
I've got a seventh grader and a third grader.
So, how has your district or your children's district responded to current learning needs, and what, knowing that you might not be able to say everything you want to say, what do you think that they've done well, and what do you wish they would do?
Well, all right. So I feel I ought to disclose that I'm the president of the school board. So,
that's the best surprise ever. Of course you are. Of course you are.
But here's what I can say. So I get to see it through the eyes of the school that I teach at, as well as the school that my students are in. And I really genuinely do think both are doing an exemplary job in very different ways. The school district that my kids are in, they are, incredibly well organized and supportive. They actually closed the school down before the governor required them to, just by about a week. But then they took that time, that week and the spring break week, to get all their ducks in a row, to do some teacher professional development, to really get everybody, together and working on moving forward as one. And they were very methodical and deliberate about how they rolled this e-learning out with the students, in terms of, not doing too much too quickly, about really trying to start off minimally and then building upwards, and being very conscientious about what we can do well and what we can't do well, and not beating ourselves up over the things that we can't do, and, doing the best that we can.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And Steve, so what are some of the things that they're doing well, and what can't they do well?
So they made the decision that they didn't want students to be on screens all the time, and they recognized that there was a lot of challenge with these live virtual meetings. So they've tried to minimize them. So advisories will meet live periodically, and it's honestly more for a social, more like an SEL sort of thing. Just to make sure that everybody's doing okay, to talk through issues, to give them that contact. And then lessons are very well structured. They're all funneled through a single repository. They all go through Schoology. Everybody's working in the same way. There's a lot of consistency for the parents and the students, which is helpful. And like I said, they started off with just core classes with very, very minimal assignments. And then every week they would add a little bit more curriculum, another assessment. Maybe we would add a little bit more specials, but even the specials are well balanced. In that, there's not this massive expectation that you're going to do everything that you would in a normal schedule.
Wait, a seventh grader doesn't have to write a symphony? Are you sure about that?
Well, here's the beautiful thing about it. Yes, he's missing doing the traditional band, but he and some friends all pick up their instruments and they jump on a Zoom together. And
Yes, I've seen some of those videos. I cry. I'm
Yeah.
not a weepy person, but dang, you get some kids together doing virtual creative stuff, and I'm like, I love you, babies. And then I start crying.
And this is giving them that time and that impetus to explore those channels. So
Exactly.
it's nice. Yeah.
So Victoria, I know you said you don't have kids, but when you think of your role kind of as an ed tech consultant, what do you know or what do you have that you wish, this is going to sound bad, but what do you wish you could force down the throats of districts or district leaders just so that teachers would be able to access it, use it, share it, spread it?
So many things.
I knew, I had a funny feeling you were sitting on some ideas.
I will say, again, I work at a private independent school, right? It's very different from me being in like a full-fledged district. So my current role on like the educator side, I've got a lot more autonomy than I would in a district. So I'm just going to, I guess, speak on my South Carolina experiences. I'm a very techie teacher. I always have been. I've always seen the value of using technology in education. I think one of the biggest trends that I'm seeing just across the board, consulting, and then also, in my space of ed tech and also being a teacher, is that I feel like a lot of teachers, particularly older ones, are very tech averse, right? And they also believe that technology is less of like a guide on the side, but more of like I don't even know how to describe it. They feel as though tech might take their job away.
Yeah, my mom she's 70. She'll be 71 soon. And she was a math and science teacher. And she's not tech averse, but she still has that, I don't want to call it a fear, but a concern. I don't know. She's like, well, if we just send our kids to these Google Classrooms, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Ma, they're not going to learn without a teacher presence.
Right.
So
Definitely.
Tell me about your thoughts, your feelings, your approach on that.
Yeah. I mean, I always kind of start with saying that all of these solutions, which are essentially LMS, right? It's like a learning management system.
Exactly.
Whether it's Teams, whether it's like Schoology, whether it's Google Classroom, whether it's like Power School, Power Teacher, there are all kinds of different ones, but I view them less as like complete learning solutions, even though I think that some programs do a much better job of others. They're more like blending learning solutions. It's like if I go onto Microsoft Teams, I can't just be like, here's the lesson, bye, right? I uploaded something super cool into like this folder in files. Please make sure you go check it out. And then when you're done, here's a link to this Microsoft form. So like the way that my school does it right now is we have asynchronous time and then we have synchronous time with the emergency remote learning. But even during the instructional day, pre-COVID, I would not just put my kids on Google Classroom and call it a day. That was kind of like where all my files were hosted. It was more of like a learning hub versus like the driver of the content. Like
Gotcha.
I was the driver of the content, the classroom, the portal, whatever I used based off of where I was teaching, was basically the hub for where everything was. Right.
Yeah.
So whenever I talk to teachers in tech companies, I'm like, okay. And I think they get the message, hopefully. But this is the hub where everything is happening, but the teacher still needs to completely be there, right, in order to facilitate the learning.
Sure.
So that's one of my big things that I always tell people. Another thing that I touch on a lot whenever I consult or just even when I'm talking with other teachers is, especially now, there's so much tech overwhelm, like especially post-COVID.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And Beyond, and they're like, this is what we're doing for COVID. I'm like, I mean, this is great, Bed Bath & Beyond, like, thank you.
Yes.
But, for tech companies, it's getting very overwhelming for a lot of our teachers. So what I tell everybody is you've got to kind of find what sticks for you, right? And then once your brain has time to modify and adjust to what's going on right now, then you can begin to explore. I was having a conversation with two great educators, Jennifer Jeffries, who's on Twitter, and then Adam Yankai. I think I pronounced his last name right. They're both on Twitter.
I think I follow Adam. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interject, but I'm like, oh.
You're good. Adam.
It was a Steve Dembo moment.
Yeah, Adam's great. Jen's great. But completely unrelated, like we wanted to have a meeting to talk about tech equity, or techquity as we call it. And then it literally turned into a conversation of like, are we okay? Like, are we overwhelmed? And then Jen brought up that, right now our bodies and minds are kind of in crisis mode, which explains why whenever I get an email from a tech company asking to try out this product or, this or that and the other, I really want to do it because I want to learn what's going on, but like physically and mentally, I just can't, right? So I've got my 5 that I use consistently. They're like tried and true in my classroom. I'm eventually going to get to the point where I can begin to test some out again. But right now, I'm just going to stick with those 5. So for a lot of teachers I work with that are tech averse, I'm like, find your 5, right? And even if it's not 5, then you can find 3 or even just 1, right? Find something that works for you. Try it out in your classroom, test it out. And also, if it works well with one class and doesn't work well with another, it doesn't mean that the entire script should be scrapped. All that means is that, okay, maybe this class works better with this platform versus the other, right? So I teach 4 different math classes. I teach an IB Algebra 2. I teach an accelerated Algebra 2. And then I teach an integrated Math 1 that's in 2 separate sections. And one moves at a bit of a different pace than the other. So it's like based off of subject matter, student interest, just academic interest, right? I'm going to be using different platforms, and that's not a problem. I just make sure that I'm using them based off of what's good for my kids. And I think that part of that too is like, do what's best for your kids. Like, you might like this platform, but if they hate it, it's probably not a good idea.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Always keep the kids in mind. Always.
I'm going to make a hashtag out of Find Your 5 because so my role in my school district is that I'm a district administrator. I don't supervise campus principals, but I report directly to the superintendent, and I supervise several like federal programs, curriculum and instruction, things like that, which means that it still is my responsibility to make sure that students, parents, teachers, administrators have access and tools that they need. And so, I think I said earlier in this podcast, I'm an early adopter, like, ooh, there's a new platform. Okay. But it doesn't mean that it's the right fit. And so narrowing those choices and strategizing to target them towards specific, like I'm looking at XYZ online platform and it's great for 4th and 5th, but it's not okay for 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. Do it. It's so I appreciate that. And Find Your 5 is, I don't know. That's it. It's almost like a SMART goal.
Right. Definitely. Yeah.
Is now the right time for EdTech companies to be trying to push a new product to supposedly help teachers, or is it too kind of overwhelming then for teachers right now to take in new stuff?
That's a good question. I'm going to give like an answer, non-answer. I think it's
Love it.
That's what I call it when I'm like, I have the answer, but there are some conditions, right?
Fair enough.
So I think that like if the companies are coming from a genuine place of concern, so like the companies that I work with, if I get contacted, it's very much like, okay, what do we do? What's going on? How can we help? Right? How can we help is always going to be the driving question. If the driving question is how can we make money, that's when I stop the conversation because I don't. Right now, what I'm not a fan of is companies, and thankfully I don't work with any of them right now. I have gotten contacted from a couple that I've had to be like, I just don't know if this is a good fit for me as a consultant, but. There have been conversations where the first phrase is, how can I make money? And that's not okay because education, unlike other models, we cannot look at it like a business. Your return on investment is not just going to come from who buys your product or who uses the platform. It is also going to come from how many repeat users you have, right? So the biggest driver in that factor is how can we help, and also how can we sustain the teacher? How can we keep modifying and adjusting to his or her needs? So there's a lot of different aspects to this that I just don't think that the people asking the question that begins with how can I make money are taking into account. So I don't think that it's necessarily a bad idea for it to be looked at from like a helpful position, as long as it's meaningful and as long as it's coming from the angle of we are here to help. If it's anything outside of that, then it's going to be a no-go. And I've straight up had teachers tell me like, yep, I've blocked this company because they just very clearly want my business right now. And they're not giving me resources, or they're not giving me tips and tricks. Like it's just a business transaction at that point. And they don't want it to be a business transaction. It's got to be empathetic. So that's my answer, non-answer.
No, I think that's exactly right. And then, so Steve, without putting too delicate an edge on it, some of your previous work history has been based on providing that sort of professional development and support to other teachers around the nation. And now you're back in the classroom. So how do you sort of bridge that gap, or think about those dichotomies of making money versus providing services versus just doing what's right?
Yeah, they seem like oppositional goals. Yeah, I'm very interested.
Yeah, I think it's a real big challenge because so having worked in the for-profit world in the past, it's almost impossible for a company to look at this situation and more than likely they're hurting. So they're trying to figure out what they can do, like every other business in the world. How can they make ends meet, or at least come out of this without it being catastrophic? It's almost impossible for them to not have that in mind. And to be honest, it would probably be unfair to their employees for them not to be thinking along those lines. But at the same time,
that's fair.
I hear what you were just saying about, making sure that it's coming from an empathetic place and doing what's right by students and so on. I think the biggest thing for me right now is teachers, more so than ever, are getting bombarded right now. And you're right, it's very, very difficult to separate the wheat from the chaff and so on. And most teachers right now are over their heads just trying to manage this transition and keeping up with their students and communicating with parents and so on and so forth. So what I have found, the companies that I have thought were doing an exemplary job are the ones that empathize and say, we understand where you're at, and we're just going, this is exactly how we're going to try and help, and here's how you can participate, no strings attached. We'll talk again 3 months down the road. There's been a lot of companies that have opened up their premium services. I mean, Zoom is the one that, did it, was one of the first ones, and they also somewhat paid the price for that too, for their own success. But then there's a lot of other companies that have said, you know what, we'll offer up our services for free. We'll let you take advantage of them and so on. I think that's absolutely fantastic for the teachers that are comfortable or settled enough that they can reach for something more. Yeah.
I think part of that too, I completely understand businesses, they want to make sure that they turn a profit. They want to make sure they're fair to their employees. The unfortunate teacher side of that is they don't see that side. I think that all of us that are talking right now, we can totally see both sides. As like if I were just a teacher and if I got an email from a company that was like, hey, try this out. By the way, here's this trial. And then another question I've also been having is, after these 90-day, 3-month trials are done, what's going to happen to all of these resources, right? So, Steve, I think you bring up a really good point where, we've got to kind of find, especially in our roles, that middle ground where we see all sides, right? And we want to make sure that teachers are supported. We also want to make sure that we get the point across to the companies and the constituents that we work with. But we also want to keep our jobs, right? We also want to be getting
That's important.
this line right now where it's like, we see all sides, and there's no right answer to what's going on right now. But the best we can do is, keep it empathetic, give the resources, and then that beautiful, no strings attached, right? Like, hey, try this out. After this amount of time, let's maybe see how it works out. I definitely see combinations of that being the most successful in my role.
Gotcha. So I will say, I know, and to just inform our audience, I had sent some sort of pre-thought questions in advance of recording this podcast. But as we develop these conversations, and as Victoria and Steve both weigh in, I want to let it evolve naturally. But one of the things I still want to sort of uncover is why EdTech? How did you choose that? Where did you come to that? Why not just be a kindergarten teacher, social studies teacher, whatever? What dragged you into this unique platform where we're teaching our students, but there's more to it?
I'm sorry, are you asking how, like, what drove me to shift from the classroom into technology? Or
Yeah, so you can be a kindergarten teacher and never get into EdTech. Like,
Yeah.
you can still do, choice boards and coloring and the calendar wall, and you might not even ever introduce your students to technology, especially at that educational level. So why EdTech? How'd you get there? Why'd you land on that?
I kind of look at it, for me, it's actually always been about information and learning. What drove me way back in my early days, this is before, Windows and Mac machines and all that, but my very first modem, the old 300 baud modem, to connect to other people, was the fact that there were these pirate and bootleg documents full of really interesting information. This was at the time about hacking and the telephony and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
And then when the internet came around, the fact that got access to so many different sites and so much information and so many different projects and do it yourself and being connected to all these people that were pushing the boundaries, and it's just kind of always continually sort of evolved from there. Just there's so many interesting things out there to do. I couldn't imagine not trying to work that into teaching and instruction. I can't imagine doing the exact same project the same way twice when there's it would be the equivalent of having vanilla for 20 years. With so many other flavors to explore and to try and to see what vibes and what student is going to like this flavor but not like that flavor and so on. And especially when you can make use of all those things and still hit the core elements that you're working to teach.
Sure.
So
It
that's
sounds like
really
a
kind of came
personality thing. And Victoria said something similar. Like you were always a techie teacher. It sounds like you're similar. You always wanted to try different ways of, conveying information. Is this like a field that is suited to certain just natural personalities or people with certain interests?
I would say the answer to that is yes. But what I will also caveat that with is I think it's the personality that leads people to teaching to begin with. It's that desire to learn new things and to share them with others and to see those light bulbs go on for students and so on. So, yes, the tech is an element of it, but I think most teachers, when you show them something new, something interesting, whether it has anything to do with what they teach or not, they get excited. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's you could say that it's a technology, that it's a part of the personality that would gravitate towards technology, but I think it's just the type of personality that gravitates towards teaching. It's the same sort of things.
Sure.
Gotcha.
One piece of technology that I've been personally skeptical about for education is VR, but I've read a bunch of articles now that virtual reality it could have been great, I guess, in this COVID-19 if it had reached that level. What do y'all think about VR, I guess, in the education space?
I remember going to an EdTech thing up in Seattle at the Pacific Science Center. And I'm so blanking on the name of it, but it was like a VR like storybook. And like every time you moved your head, like it like created this new landscape and it was beautiful. And I thought it was so cool, but I remember taking off the headset and thinking, wow, I have a headache. Because it just hurt my head so much. So I don't really know too much about VR, just like in general with education. I just don't feel like there's not enough available that's accessible, to I'm going to say my girls because I teach at like a girls division, but, they kind of view VR as like, maybe it's like the mocap suits or, they might see it through different movies and things like that. But just from like a teaching perspective, there's not much that I've been able to do in math that has been accessible. So I'm willing to learn more information. I just haven't seen too much about it. You're going to have to go to
I just can't. So I will say, so as a random interjection that has nothing to do with anything we're talking about, it like has spent my whole life on Zoom right now. And I have seen children pop in. I've seen babies with diapers. Unfortunately, I have seen shirtless husbands. All kinds of random things. And the fact that we have a growling dog who is only mad at us because he's not on video.
Literally, he is staring at me. He's oscillating.
I just can't help it. I'm like, baby, I'm sorry. It's just
my wife was here because she usually handles him, but I tried to put him in the cage and he's even more destructive because then he barks because he wants attention. So I was like, okay,
I mean, we're going to have to find a way to explain to him that podcasts do not have pictures, but
it's okay, little guy.
A couple of things that I was thinking about were, you've sort of talked about it, kind of what made you choose EdTech, like how did you focus on that? But were there barriers in the way? How did you overcome those? Or, were there people who inspired you, who helped you out? And then maybe what do you see in the future for EdTech, or what do you hope might be in the future for EdTech?
Yeah. For me, so I got into EdTech just for career growth and mobility, honestly. It's different here now that I'm in Washington, but back when I was in South Carolina, it was almost like if you were a teacher, you either became an instructional coach, right? Or you became an administrator. There wasn't a lot of room for like upward mobility that was within or not within the building, I guess I'll say. And I mean, I don't necessarily want to be an admin. Jury's still out as to whether or not I want to do that. But, I'm only 26 and I know that I did not feel comfortable stepping into that kind of administrative role. And my master's is actually in curriculum and instruction with just a focus on tech and, tech equity and all those fun things that come along with it. But for me as like a young Black gay woman, those are all the obstacles right there. like bam.
No, I get it. I get it.
Being in South Carolina too. I mean, I'm very happy to be surrounded and still be surrounded with a very supportive group of people. Right. But it's kind of hard, like even now in my role, I walk into a room and I'm the only one younger than 30. And that is a big deal to some people. That might
interesting. Even in EdTech, like tech is full of.
So in a lot of the divisions that I work in, most of the full-time employees are older professionals. I say older, like they're not like ancient or anything, but they're like 40 up.
They're probably my age, but that's okay.
And then most of like the contract or part-time employees are younger. So if I'm walking into a room where it's mostly board directors or full-time employees, they're like my parents' age, and they kind of look at me like one of their kids, right? Instead of, the professional or like the subject matter expert. And thankfully, once I like introduce myself and they get to know me, they're like, okay, this girl knows what she's doing, right?
Sure.
But at first, that age barrier does come just a bit uneasy at times, because sometimes I'm like, I need to make sure that I'm on top of my game, right? Because also being young and being a woman, being a Black woman sometimes does come with stipulations. And then being a woman on top of all that, it's like, oh, I just hit like the lottery for, all
and it shouldn't be that way. I mean, your knowledge is your knowledge, right?
Definitely should not be. And I'm very fortunate now, and even back when I was in South Carolina too, to always be surrounded by people that were supportive of me, and we always came towards a common goal. But I think what I'm trying to say is I'm very conscious of who I am in my skin, and also the image that I portray both professionally and personally, because I'm not afraid of who I am. My wife is always out and about with me. I'm not ashamed to be a young woman in tech, and that's also another thing. Being a woman in tech has a very different connotation, and also depending on divisions, we might be fulfilling different roles. So I always, whenever I enter a place, just make it known, like, this is who I am. We're going to work towards a common goal. And I always just start with, do you have any questions for me, right? About my background, who I am. And then we can kind of start the conversation from there. But those are definitely barriers that I have encountered to a certain degree. Thankfully, not many times, but when I do, I have had to put that professional hat on and be like, okay, so this is how it's going to be, right?
Right, yeah. So for you, so what I'm hearing then, or what I'm understanding, a lot of that. Ren does not want me to keep talking.
Sorry.
On camera, I know. Well, we might have to look into video podcasting.
Right.
Here. It's okay. I understand. But what I'm understanding is that a lot of your barriers have been cultural, socioeconomic,
Right.
Okay. And then it's going to be, I don't want it to be awkward, but it's sort of awkward. Steve is a Midwestern white middle-aged guy. So
it doesn't have to be awkward. It's just how it is. Right?
I don't know who it's awkward for, but it could be awkward.
At this point in my life, I've actually grown accustomed to being one.
There we go.
And that's a good attitude. So, Steve, though, for you with fewer cultural barriers, what barriers did you face, if any, in kind of forging this EdTech career? And then I want to hear from you, but I also want to hear again from Victoria. What would you tell young people, and by that I mean like high schoolers and college students, about how to forge this sort of blended career?
Well, so there's a few elements of it. I mean, I have a hard time saying that I struggled, because I think the struggles were what made there to be anything interesting and worth sharing to begin with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're not struggling, then you're clearly not pushing on any boundaries. But that said, here's what this is sort of the advice and sort of my own personal struggles all sort of rolled up into one. You do, and this gets back to what we are talking about with the for-profits and the companies, you do need to be authentic, and people will see right through you if you're not being authentic. Sure. You need to speak from the heart. It needs to be, legitimate and organic, and so on. But that said, the people who are successful in this space have a talent for self-promotion, and they can do it in a way that doesn't feel icky. And you have to be comfortable with it, because you have to be sharing what you're doing. You have to be walking the walk. If you're not out there promoting the great things that you're doing in the classroom or with teachers or in the district and so on, then nobody's going to know about them. The people who are, let's just say, they're promoting it, they're sharing it, they're tagging the companies that they're working with, they're tagging other friends and family to ask them to share it out there and so on. Those are the people who are going to get noticed. Those are the people who are going to get notoriety. Those are the people who are going to get companies reaching out to them to ask them to represent them. Those are the ones who are going to get the conferences who are reaching out to them and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, I decided that part of it, of the job, was the part that I was absolutely the least interested in. And
Fair enough.
That was burning me out. And it was a very large part of why I wound up going back into the classroom is I just didn't want to make that a priority anymore. So, if somebody wants to, they have to understand that it doesn't happen by accident, that it is a very deliberate process.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Steve, I have to 100% agree with you. We call that in the space, it's like an edu celeb, right? So like they spend less time in the classroom, right? And more time promoting and, they might tour with a couple of companies. And like, I find that aspect of what I do very exhausting because of course I've got my full-time job, right? And then I consult. And then on top of that, I've got to work with companies too. And my best time creating content and working with people is when it comes organically. Because when it comes organically, that's when I'm my best self, right? I don't feel like myself if I have to shamelessly promote or, if I haven't tried out a product yet and if someone just wants me to say something for like a little bit of PR or clout, like to me, it just doesn't seem authentic. And that's another reason why I'm in the classroom to some degree as well, right? Like I want to make sure that I'm doing my best work. And I know that my best work happens when I'm with kids. So for anyone that wants to enter this space, just be yourself, right? Like, you're not going to get the attention or the clout or, maybe even partnerships if you're very clearly just doing it for your own personal attention. Companies always want to make sure that it's a mutual agreement or match, right? Because if I'm partnering with one company, but if they don't believe in the work that I'm doing, right? And then if I don't believe in their product, then it's just going to be, just like lip service. But if you can really invest in the company and if they want to invest in you, then that's when some really good work gets done, right? And also you can still be in the EdTech space and still do what you love and innovate and teach and learn. And, that's what's so great about being in EdTech. We're all constantly learning from each other. So as long as you don't lose sight of that and you're not just in it to be famous or, like sell some product, then you will be golden.
Awesome. So I just have one. We're way over time. Well, way over time. We're 2 minutes over time. If you're willing to stay around, I just have one last question. What would you wish for the future of EdTech? Or what would you tell other educators, to sort of make this important reality for students and for communities?
So, this is sort of a double-edged sword because I've been not necessarily a victim of this, but I've done this same sort of thing. When you're trying to speak at a conference and bring people into the seats, there's a tendency to go lowbrow because here's what I found. When I put in, 6 months of research and interviews and so on into a very high level, deep topic, typically only 10 people will come to it. If I try and do 67 apps in 67 minutes, it will completely fill, to capacity. So there's a tendency to do those sorts of things and to make that a priority because you get the gratification of a lot of people saying, of attending and so on. And that's a very powerful thing, but it's sort of like funnel cake. It's really, really tasty. It's really, really wonderful. And the more you do it, the more nauseous you get.
I love that.
You said funnel cake, and I was like, what's wrong with funnel cake? And then you continued, and I was like, oh,
It reminds me of church. That was my childhood church snack in the summertime. Anyway, you can keep on going.
All I was going to say is just remember to keep putting the fruit in there. And even if you're going to use the funnel cake to get them through the door, hide some veggies in there as well so that It's not just all carbs and sugar.
So funnel cake and green beans. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's
cauliflower funnel cake or something like that, you know?
It's a brilliant analogy, though. It's right up my alley. Victoria, tell me what you think.
Yeah, I'm going to pivot a little bit and talk about just like content creation, and because for me, when I create content or when I work with platforms or companies, the biggest thing is that you just got to believe in that product. And I know I've already talked about it a couple of times, but you've got to make sure that you believe in the product and the tech platform and the people that are behind it, because then those interactions become so much more meaningful. And then if you want to go to a conference, right, or maybe if you're even presenting at like the school or district level, then you really become, the person that everyone's coming to find out about that platform, versus if you just give empty platitudes,
Sure.
then it's just not going to come through. So if you're interested in getting into EdTech, I always say find your five, right? Like find those 5 platforms, really start investing in those platforms. And I don't mean invest like giving money, but, reach out to them, maybe see, if they would want to meet with you. Pear Deck, which is one of my favorite platforms, they actually video conferenced in with one of my classes one day because my girls just love Pear Deck so much. And they wanted to meet my class. And it was the best thing ever, because I use Pear Deck a lot. My kids love Pear Deck, and that was such a genuine interaction that they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. This tech company, that could really not care about us, decided to take time out of our day or their day to talk to a bunch of 16 and 17-year-old young ladies.
I bet your girls felt like celebrities.
They felt even more like rock stars because Pear Deck stickers and swag. And it was just the best thing in the world, because not only did they get to talk to these people, but now they have like little Pear Deck stickers on like their water bottles.
Oh, no, they for sure are celebrities then. I totally get that.
As like a teacher and a consultant, I mean, that's a connection I'm never going to forget, right? So whenever I, get recommendations for, okay, what do I use for, synchronous instruction, or, what's great for engagement, Pear Deck is top of my list, and I can always say, on top of them being a fantastic platform, they're also very responsive. Their customer service is A1, and I 100% will continue to work with them. So as you continue to make those connections, you'll get more used to the people that are within the company, their missions, and then you can just start doing some really cool stuff. But I always tell people you can't just walk into a tech company with a binder of lessons and a song, right? It just doesn't work like that. You can want to work at one of the big 4 or like maybe a smaller tech company, but you're always going to need to have some sort of external skills. Like I'm a teacher, but I've also got the tech marketing. I've also got the ed tech consulting. If I were just a teacher, they'd want my help, but they wouldn't necessarily want to pay me because because like they'll want the help of a teacher, but they will pay a consultant. So there's always going to be a few more marketable skills that need to happen outside of that. But as long as you can make it work, then you can make it work. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So Steve, Victoria, you've given us so much of your time.
Yeah.
I think Pius and I probably thought that this would only be about a 45-minute podcast. And this is... we
could go longer.
It's been super valuable. It's been engaging. I've learned so much. I've heard so much. I do want to give each of you a last minute or two to just tell us what you hope for the future of EdTech and what you wish people could understand more deeply about EdTech.
I'd like to say before I start speaking, I think my dog has finally figured out that he's not going to be on video cam.
But did you tell him that we listened to him and we loved him?
I did. So now he's just sitting here. He definitely has his ears down because I embarrassed.
Oh, we love you, Bren. You're our new mascot.
What I wish for the future of EdTech is to just get even more teacher support. Now being in Seattle and a lot of tech companies are based here, I'm looking back and realizing I never really got reached out to when I was in South Carolina. And the South Carolina teacher's perspective is just as valid as the teacher's perspective from Seattle, just as, as valid as a teacher's perspective from Alaska or Oklahoma or Texas. So
Yes,
I think
ma'am.
it's important to get a very broad look at what teachers are doing and not just where tech companies are clustered. And I think that globally, teachers would really appreciate that. And the tech companies would appreciate it too, because then they get a more honest look at how their products are influencing classrooms. What I personally want for the future of EdTech is, with the VR, I want more information about it. I just don't think that right now it's at a place where it's accessible for a lot of our schools and kids. It's very expensive, and I just don't think that it's applicable for a lot of subjects and scenarios right now. I'm hoping that more information will come out and we'll have more growth. Right now, I'm just not seeing that. So that's kind of like my pipe dream for EdTech. I want more VR, and
Totally get it. No, I totally understand. Not to make this podcast longer, but my son's elementary school, I live in a suburb of Austin, and although I am not wealthy, I live in one of the more affluent neighborhoods because I was just fortunate with my house buying. Anyway, my son's elementary school is one of the top ranked in the state, for test scores and instruction and blah, blah, blah. And they do have some VR platforms. But I don't know that my son has ever experienced them because I don't know how they use them in school. And now that we're not on campus, I know that there's virtually no access. And so I think about things like that. Like, I have been to a few foreign countries, but I can't afford to travel right now. And I certainly can't afford to take my son with me. But why shouldn't he experience St. Petersburg, Russia?
Right, exactly.
Experience Florence, where we have some distant cousins. Why shouldn't he experience
the
Ireland
moon
and Scotland and Norway and Sweden, where
the
he
bottom of the
has,
ocean,
familial, exactly. And so for me, VR is super important. And although on paper, I'm probably one of the, whatever higher percentages, that should not matter. Like, I still can't access it. And so that concern about everyone, every student, every family being able to link in and visualize and go on an adventure, I guess.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm so glad you spoke about that. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
So I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't, speak to VR just slightly. I've actually been presenting on it for about 5 years now, and it's been a continuum, if you will, where about 5 years ago, the moral of the story was this is going to be incredibly cool. Don't even go near it right now. About 3 years ago, it was this is. 3 years ago it was this is incredibly cool, and like this isn't bad, but it's not. I still wouldn't invest money in it. About a year and a half, 2 years ago, we got to the point where there was actually a really good advance. The Oculus Go was a huge step forward at the time, but it was sort of like, this is just way better than everything you have, but it's not necessarily great. And now we've got the Oculus Quest, which I actually do think is sort of the iPad 2 of the VR world, if you will. The iPad 2, if you remember when the iPads first came around, the iPad 1, everybody was in love with it, just as a proof of concept, but it was not well suited to education in any way, shape, or form. And at the time, the content wasn't there. It wasn't even close to being there. When the iPad 2 came out, it was finally the right form factor, but it was still another year and a half, maybe even 2 years before the App Store actually had the things that educators were looking for. So we're sort of there with the VR right now, where I feel like the hardware has caught up, and the hardware is actually a very good form factor at a very competitive price point for schools. But the content we're still waiting on, and it's sort of a catch-22. Schools don't want to invest in it unless the content is there. Content developers don't want to invest their time and energy unless they've got an audience for it.
Mm.
So, so it's sort of a waiting game. But here's the one thing that causes me to be optimistic. You couldn't go into Best Buy right now and buy an Oculus Quest if you wanted to. They are ridiculously sold out and back ordered right now in most locations. So it's still gaining a huge amount of traction in the consumer market. So we're getting to a tipping point, and there are a lot of VR developers who are asking teachers right now, what do you want? What would convince you to buy in for your school and so on? And they're getting started with it. What I will just caution people, and we could go on for another. If we really want to talk VR, we should probably go on for another 30, 45.
Well, we can definitely reschedule. Pius and I are always looking for new material, so maybe we have a VR seminar,
Also, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do need to hop off because I'm meeting with the students.
Okay. Oh, no, perfect. Okay. Victoria, thank you for sharing your time with us, and thank you for all of your experiences and your knowledge. I really appreciate your time and the willingness that you have for us.
Yeah, not a problem at all. This was fantastic.
Tell your student hi.
Yes, I will. We're going to be reviewing matrices today.
Nice. Ooh. Have fun.
Yes. Yeah,
thanks Victoria.
Bye. All right, bye.
I have to wonder if they're referring to matrices like the math term, or if it's going to be like Neo and Morpheus. And
I would, knowing Victoria's background, it is definitely not Morpheus.
All right. all I was going to say, just to wrap up, just to put a pin on the VR thing, is what I would caution people is I find a lot of people who want to try and put it sort of in the same conversation that we've had with Chromebooks and iPads and so on about consumption versus creation, and say I don't want to buy into VR until people can create VR experiences with the headset on and so on. And that's not what it's all about. That's not its strong suit. That's not what you should be looking for. That's not the conversation we should be having. Most people who develop VR experiences, they do it on a desktop. They don't do it inside the VR space. That's not what it's about. What it's about is giving people, these first-person experiences, for things that they normally could not experience in a first-hand way.
Yeah. Again, at my son's school, they bought the VR experience so that students at the school who, for example, don't have the opportunity to travel, blah, 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 they could check them out, take them home, go to Rome, go to wherever, but that hasn't fully materialized. And so I always think about the gaps in intention versus what is accessible and what is available and what is truly, present or prescient in our current environment.
Well, like I said, that's something we're happy to wax poetic about it, but maybe for another day.
Fair.
Totally agreed.
We can do that.
Yeah.
All right. Pius, do you have other questions?
No, not. I can save any questions I have for another day. Okay. I just wanted to say my same thanks, just like to Victoria. Thanks, Steve, for talking. It was really interesting listening to you.
Oh my gosh, I know. And I'm so again, Steve and I have never met face to face, but until today, we've never spoken in person. And so I'm still, with both Steve and Victoria, I'm still fangirling. I'm like, oh my God, I talked to these people. It's so crazy. Because I'm not Steve, I don't know if you know, my background is in secondary science and a little bit of engineering and then curriculum development and so on. But currently I'm a district administrator. And so when I speak to people who have a stronger media presence or who have a stronger like grassroots learning presence, I'm always in awe. So here am I over in my little teeny tiny rural district going, oh my gosh, y'all, I know Steve Dembo. And now I have actually spoken to you. So for me, it's crazy.
We'll call it a mutual admiration society.
Oh, thank you. You are way too kind.
All right. For having me. This has been an absolute pleasure. Love just hanging out and getting a chance to talk EdTech.
Oh, we appreciate you being here. This is super important to both of us.
You got to come down to South by Southwest again once all of this is over.
Yeah.
I can't wait. It's going to be crazy and awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Also, I guess, thank you for indulging me because I'm not usually the host. And so the fact that you allowed me into your homes, your offices, your workspaces to ask the questions and prompt the conversations, that means a lot to me. So thank you to all the listeners of the K-12 Engineering Education Podcast.
Thanks to our guests in this South by Southwest 2020 episode, Steve Dembo and Victoria Thompson. The K-12 Engineering Education Podcast is sponsored by my studio, Pios Labs, in Austin, Texas, and also by The Engineer's Guide to Improv and Art Games, available through Amazon and other booksellers. This show is also made possible by incredible individuals donating to the show on Patreon. You can help continue the podcast by donating online too. Just check out patreon.com/PiosLabs. Visit the podcast website for show notes, links, transcripts, and more. Go to k12engineering.net. On behalf of Rachel and of course myself, thank you for listening and for supporting the show.